The Arcanist has been a super fun class to play since it came out with the Necrom DLC, and is still reigning strong even with Update 43 and Update 44 that's coming out this November for Xbox. In this video, I'm going to go over my Arcanist Stamina Bow build that I use for DPS when I'm questing around a zone, as well as in some endgame content. Make sure you watch the entire video so you know all the details of the build and can build out your specs the way you would like them. Let's get started. First up is our build basics. If you already have this part of your build filled out, you can skip ahead to get into some gear or check out the chapters in the description below and find exactly what you're looking for. But if you're a beginner and want the full details of this build, this is a great place to start. First up is the race of your character. Overall, race doesn't really impact DPS too much in the game, so I would just suggest playing on what you would like to play on, your favorite race. If you want to play the most meta in terms of getting the most damage, then Dark Elf is the way to go here. Orc is the second best option, giving you a little bit better survivability, and then High Elf is also another great choice. I went Khajiit, which is a good choice in terms of crit if you don't have that maxed out in your group that you're running with, or if you're just running solo, but honestly I just wanted to play a Khajiit and I thought this would be a great way to do it. Next up is Mundus Stone. Mundus Stone is a bonus that you can have on each and every one of your characters. All you have to do is find a Mundus Stone in the wild or head to your guild hall and pick up the stone you want. For DPS, I recommend putting on the Thief. The Thief gives us a ton of critical chance, which is really hard to find elsewhere in the game. So that's going to give us the most DPS here on this build. In some situations, you might want the Lover or the Shadow to give you a little bit better penetration or critical damage if that's what you need on your build. Or maybe even you want to go fast, in which case you might choose the Steed to boost your overall speed. But this is something you can really customize and make work for your build however you would like. For your attributes, which are points on your character that you can fill out as you level up to level 50, we're going to want all the points to go into Stam. There's really no reason why we would need Magicka or health on this build, and so we're going to go for the maximum amount of damage here and go for all Stam. Next up is food and drinks. What kind of food and drinks do you want to have on your character to help buff your DPS? In most cases, the buy stat blue food is going to give us the best DPS and survivability. In this case, it's the Braised rabbit shown here. This is really great because it boosts our health and our stamina, increasing our damage and giving us that health buff. But if you're parsing, you might want to try the green single stat food. This is going to increase your stamina and give you a little bit more damage on that parsing dummy, versus in the wild, the health is going to help us survive a bit better. Another good option for food is always going to be the Bewitched Sugar Skulls. This will boost all three of your stats in health, magicka, and stamina. If you're in a pinch and you need something to run, this is always a good option. Next up is potions. What pots should you be running on this character to increase your DPS? Well, the best in the game is Heroism pots, since they give you the most buffs, but they are expensive to make, requiring Columbine, Dragon Blood, and Dragon Rum. So I would really only recommend running these if you're running endgame content, or if you're on the dummy and really want to maximize your DPS. But I think instead another really great option is just tripods that you can get from the Crown store, or that you can make instead by combining Columbine, Bugloss, and Mountain Flower. This is going to give you an all-around buff on all your stats and is a really great way to just boost your DPS while also keeping your survivability in mind. And they're much less expensive to make, so that's a bonus as well. Next up is our champion points. In the green tree, this is mostly your choice and bonuses that are mostly passive and related to crafting, stealing, things like that. But one I will recommend is the Steed's Blessing to increase your movement speed outside of combat, just so that you can get around a little bit quicker, whether you're in a trial or out in the wild questing. In the blue tree, I'm going to recommend putting on Biting Aura, Thaumaturge, Wrathful Strikes, and Exploiter. These are going to give us the best AoE damage buffs in the game, and since the Arcanist has a ton of AoE damage from the beam as well as the bow, these are going to increase our DPS and give us the maximum output. Now, Exploiter does require the off balance debuff on the enemy, so if you want to switch that out for something else like Deadly Aim or Master of Arms to increase some single target damage, you can certainly switch that out. I would recommend playing around with this and optimizing it to your needs. I'll throw some videos in the description that get a little bit sweatier than this build if you want to maximize your damage, so check those out as well. Now in terms of the orange tree, again, this is more buffs to your character, so you can kind of pick and choose depending on the content you are running. I would recommend Boundless Vitality, Rejuvenation, Fortified, and then something of your choice. Slippery is really good in some content if you need to break free from AoEs, as well as PvP. I personally like having Spirit Mastery so that I can res my teammates just a little bit faster, or if you want to go even faster in the game if you're exploring the zone, Celerity is a really good pick, as well as the bonus passive Hasty. Now that you have all your buffs set up and your bonuses filled out on your character, let's talk about gear. I would recommend running the Deadly set from the Bruma vendor, as well as the Perfected Coral Riptide, or just regular Coral Riptide, from the Dreadcells Reef trial. The Deadly is going to give us weapon damage and spell damage, which is really good right now in terms of damage in the game in general, and works really well with the Arcanist. The Coral Riptide does require you to lower your stamina pool, but the recovery on the Arcanist is really good, making this set pretty easy to run even when keeping your stam under 30%. When you use some of the skills that I'll recommend in just a little bit, it's pretty easy to stamina dump before you parse, or even in content before you're pulling a boss. I would recommend dual wield on the front bar with 2 daggers. As you can see here, I have 2 deadly daggers equipped, one with poison and one with flame, as those are just the best enchants in terms of meta damage in the game. You could really put whatever kind of damage you would like, but if you're going for the maximum amount, these are the enchants I would recommend. I would also recommend having Charged and Nirnhoned as your trait respectively, because this will also help boost your damage on those weapons as well. On the backhand weapon, I have the Maelstrom bow. Now I would recommend going with the Dragonstar Arena bow instead, because that's going to give you a much better proc with your poison arrow skill, which I'll get into in just a second. So that's going to be the better choice for DPS. I just don't have the caustic bow, so I threw on the Maelstrom because it's another good one in terms of the volley, giving us more damage there, but I would recommend switching to the caustic bow if you have that instead. We're going to need 1-piece monster set because we're running the Thaumaturge Mage's Amulet, which in this case I just chose Slimecraw. It's the highest DPS 1-set monster set in the game, but you can play around with this as well and pick what works for you. Maybe you need some more recovery instead of the damage. This is a good way to tweak that and add what you would like for your build. This also means that we will need to have 1 piece on our body for deadly since we can't run the amulet, so I went with the Jack here. We will want this to have divines and the stamina enchant for maximum damage. Now in terms of body pieces, I chose to go with the Coral Riptide with divines to boost your Mundus Stone, which in this case is the Thief. Again, this is just meta based on the builds that I've seen. Now we're also going to be running the Thaumaturge Mage's Amulet as our mythic item. It means light attacking isn't quite as important in this build, which is especially helpful since our beam lasts for about 3 seconds and we're not light attacking while that's running. So this pairs really well with the Arcanist in particular. Since we can't light attack as we're beaming, this is going to make up for that and give us the damage where we need it. Last but not least, for jewelry, we're going to fill out our deadly set here. Rings and necklace. I would recommend going Bloodthirsty to increase your damage, and then the spell damage enchant. Now if you're parsing, Highland Sentinel is another really good set because you get damage if you're standing still. So as long as you're not moving, this is going to boost your DPS and your parse. I personally like parsing in the gear that I'm wearing for a trial or something like that, so I know exactly what my damage output's going to be. But if you're pushing for the most single target damage, that's going to be a one set that you might want to look at. Another really great option is Onsol's Perfected, which comes out of Sanity's Edge, or just the regular as well. This is going to boost your damage and is another really good set, although I think Coral gives you a little bit more DPS on the Arcanist. Onsol's is another great choice. The same thing goes for Whirl of Depths, which comes out of the Dreadcell Reef trial as well, if you're looking for another option there. The downside to Whirl is that it does proc off light attacks, which as I mentioned, we're light attacking less because we're an Arcanist and we have the Exhausting Fate card for Beam, but it's still the next best set in the game in terms of damage, so it's still a good option here as well. Now let's talk skills. There's so many options when it comes to skills. You can always pick and choose what you would like, and you don't even have to run the bow on this character as well. You could run a staff, a greatsword, whatever suits your personal interest. I like the bow a lot because it gives me some versatility to have the 2 daggers on the front bar and then some range on the back bar. Plus I like the speed boost. but the choice is totally up to you. In any case, on my front bar, I run the 2 daggers, so dual wield, and I'm going to be running the Exhaustive Fate Carver skill. This is the beam that gives the Arcanist a ton of damage, so it's a really great skill to have on your bar. And I chose to go Exhausting for the higher DPS, but the Pragmatic will give you a shield if you're looking for some more survivability. Next up is Echoing Vigor. When you're running content as a group, you might not need Vigor because your healers are awesome, but if you're just running around questing, I like to have a self-heal on, and there are some instances in endgame content where you would want a self-heal as well, and Vigor is my go-to for this. Next, we're going to be running Cephalarch's Flail, as this is a way to generate Crux. On the Arcanist, you need to generate Crux to get the most DPS out of your beam. Once you have 3, you can fire it off. So this is our spammable essentially to get up to 3 Crux, and it also does damage and heals us as well, so it's a really well-rounded skill to have on the Arcanist. Next up is the Camo Hunter, which is our source of major savagery and prophecy, which is going to increase our weapon and spell critical, and it also gives us minor berserk. So that's more crit damage, just an overall really good buff skill to have on your bar, whether you're in a trial or running around questing. Last up, I have Xena's Empowering Disc, which is typically used on 1 DPS in a trial to help buff the rest of the group. I was running a trial, so I still had this on, but you could replace it with another skill that you would rather run. I would probably run Blade Cloak instead if you're running the dual wield daggers. This is a really good skill to have. It does damage over time, as well as giving you a little bit of a shield, so it's a pretty powerful skill to have on your bar for all content. For our ultimate on the front bar, I'm going to recommend running Flawless Dawnbreaker. The Flawless Dawnbreaker is going to help with that Fighter's Guild passive, so we slot it on our front bar, even though we won't necessarily be using it in content. Although if you're at the end of a fight in a trial, you can pop this instead if you can't get your regular ultimate back. It'll give you a little bit of burst damage and help you in the fight just a little bit faster. On our back bar, we do have our bow. So the first up is the Endless Hail ability. This is an AoE damage skill, so it'll be buffed by all of our AoE passives. And I also throw on Poison Injection, which is what I mentioned works really well with that caustic bow. But it's also just a really great dot to have, so I use it even with the Maelstrom bow here. Fulminating Rune is another really great DPS Arcanist skill. It's going to tick damage over time, and it gives a really great synergy for your allies in a group. They can activate that rune break, and it's going to deal even more damage in a group setting versus solo. Next, we're going to keep Camo Hunter on our back bar as well to make sure we keep those buffs up. And last but not least is Inspired Scholarship. This is another really great source of bonuses for the Arcanist, and it buffs our character, giving us Major Brutality and Minor Sorcery, which is going to increase our weapon and spell damage by 20%. These buffs are really huge and hard to get in the game otherwise, so running Inspired Scholarship is really going to increase your DPS. And last but not least, we're going to be running the Languid Eye as our ultimate on the back bar. This is what you're going to want to pop unless you're in that very niche situation I mentioned about Flawless Dawnbreaker. It's another AoE over time, boosted by all of our other buffs and abilities we've slotted, making this the best choice for our ultimate here as well. In terms of parsing, I definitely can't hit the high numbers that some of the sweatier people can hit, but I'm able to hit upper 80s and 90s with this build. So I think it's a pretty solid, well-rounded DPS build that you can start and just have some fun with. I really enjoy playing with the bow on this build, so I hope you enjoy it as well. This is my first build video. Let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments, or if I missed something, please let me know as well. If you like this video and want some more build videos, let me know in the comments as well. I also want to give a huge shout out to my very first member, Lights On. Thank you so much for joining my channel. I really appreciate the support. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.